local story. When I was pastor at the Bloomingdale Mennonite Church, not too far from here, I was pastor there, and the congregation went through a period of discernment. And people in the congregation said that the major spiritual challenge that they feel in their lives right now is the challenge of how busy they are. Busy with work, busy with committees, busy with running around with the kids, and they felt like they weren't spending time on the things that were really most important. They just always felt frazzled. And so the congregation did this period of discernment, and they approached the elders in the congregation, and they said, busyness and being overwhelmed is the major spiritual challenge for us these days. Please help us with this. And the elders said, you're right. This is an important spiritual challenge, and we need to address it. And then the elders took over 2 years to do any further response because the elders themselves were too busy. All right? So what I see here is the fact that our culture is too busy, and there are ways of explaining that, thinking about that, talking about that. Our culture is too busy, and we as Christians are also caught up in the very same busyness. And what worries me is if we Christians don't know how to live differently in the midst of all of this, what do we really have to offer our neighbors in the world who are hurting in their kind of lifestyle? I believe that we Christians have deep resources for dealing with this kind of stuff, but I'm not sure that we know how to draw on them anymore. I feel like there's a gap. Eugene Peterson cautions that in our comfortable ways of life, the wonder has leaked out. He says the wonder has leaked out. And I believe that this distracted busyness that I saw in Camino, but that I saw also as a pastor, is what's driving the spiritual hunger and hunger in our culture and in our churches. Folks often talk about things that they would do if only I had more time. If only I had more time, I would spend quality time with children. I would have energy for charities. I would host meals. I would volunteer, play music, garden, exercise, take better care of myself. This is a professed desire to live differently than the way that we're actually living. And it's kind of a sad thing that so many of us are saying that we don't live according to our highest priorities. There was a study done at Princeton Seminary quite a few years ago. Calvinist, right? That'd be a Calvinist seminary, Princeton. What's that? Originally. So originally a Calvinist seminary. So the study was done with a number of seminary students. And it was conducted by a couple of psychologists. And here's the way that the study went. The seminary students were all gathered into a large room with the psychologists. And they were told that they would have to go to the other side of the campus, and by the time they got to the other side of the campus, they were supposed to preach just a short sermon, 10 minutes or so, preach a short sermon either on vocation, the vocation to which they've been called, or on the parable of the Good Samaritan, one of Jesus' most beloved parables. And so they were told that they would have to walk to the other side of the campus, and by the time they were there, they would have to deliver a homily, a short sermon, on one of these two subjects. But there were a couple of wrinkles in the way that the psychologists were conducting this experiment, and you might be able to guess what one of the wrinkles were. So just think, if they have to walk across campus and preach a parable of Good Samaritan, what might a mischievous psychologist do? You guess?
Blindfolded.
Blindfolds? That'd be rough. Yeah. Any other guesses?
Have someone laying there beaten in the room.
Exactly. So what they did was they got a number of actors and got them to dress as down and outers who were in need and sprinkled them through the campus and had them sprawled around so that the seminarians would have to walk by them along the way. In fact, one they had laid across a narrow alleyway that some of the students would walk through as a shortcut, and so they would actually have to step over this guy to get where they were going, to the noble task of preaching either about their vocation or preaching on the parable of the Good Samaritan. So you got that picture? You got the assignment? You got the wrinkle? Okay? But there was one more wrinkle. And that wrinkle went like this. They divided the room in half. It didn't matter what subject the people were preaching on. They divided the room in half. And with the one half of the room, they rehearsed the assignment. You have to walk across campus. You have to preach a short sermon on the Good Samaritan or on vocation, and just relax. You have lots of time to get there. The campus is not as confusing as Cambridge city streets, so you're good. Just take your time. And with the other half of the group, they rehearse the assignment. You have to preach a short sermon on the Good Samaritan or on vocation, and oh man, you're already late. You better hurry. Okay? So half the group was told that they were late and they ought to hurry. Well, what were the results? The results of the experiment were these. There was no difference between the people who preached on the Good Samaritan or on vocation. There was no difference in how they responded, except the same number approximately responded and the same number didn't respond to the down and outers. But there was a huge difference between those who thought they were late and those who thought they were on time. Most of the people, 9 out of 10 people who thought they were late did not stop to help. 9 out of 10. And most of the people who had lots of time did stop to help. Now that's really striking, don't you think? And it's even more striking when you think about our culture. Our culture is one that's obsessed with time, with speed, with efficiency. We live in a culture that's always telling us, you're late, 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 you gotta go faster, you gotta hurry, you gotta get more done. We get this message in all kinds of ways. We get this message from the priority of multitasking. We get this message from the efficiency of our technology. Our technology can do more than ever, therefore we should do more than ever. When I was a pastor, a young pastor, and I got my first computer, I discovered that my computer could cut a lot of my writing time in half. And so what did I do? Did I do the wise Christian thing of saying, wow, cut my time in half, I could spend more time with my small children who are at home? Or did I do, wow, cut my time in half, now I can accomplish twice as much? I'll let you guess, and you do not need to be charitable in your guess to get it correct. So we live in a culture that encourages us to be faster and faster, to be busier and busier, to do more and more things. And what I wonder from the parable or from the experiment at Princeton is if we live in a culture that is telling us we're not doing enough, if we live in a culture that tells us we need to do more and more and more, what is that doing to our hearts? What is that doing to our values? What is that doing to our priorities? And I think that if we as Christians don't find ways to talk about these kinds of issues, if we as Christians don't figure out how to be discerning in the midst of these kinds of dynamics, we're going to get swept along with the rest of culture. There were a number of experiments in the 1960s by a guy named Stanley Milgram. They were really famous, these experiments grew out of reflections on World War II. You might have heard of these experiments. Stanley Milgram was trying to figure out why was it that during the Nazi regime, during World War II, so many people could obey unethical orders and just say, I was only following orders. And so he was trying to understand this dynamic a little bit more, so he set up this experiment where he would have students come in who were supervised with people in white lab coats, and then there would be other people in another room that they could see through a one-way mirror. And these people were hooked up to machines, and the students would be ordered to give them electrical zaps. Some of you have heard of that experiment. Now the zaps weren't real, and the people in the other room, they were actors, but the students didn't know that. The students actually thought they were delivering painful electrical jolts to folks at the other room, in the other room. And these experiments have been analyzed all kinds of ways because it was very disturbing to see how willing the students were to obey painful orders, to deliver excruciating pain, to deliver electrical volts that could look like they were all